So what I'm going to work on now is replacing the seal off of the bottom of this crankcase pan, and try to carefully remove the old one. Going to have to do a little bit of work to scrape the old gasket off. I'll get off as much of it as I possibly can. And so now I have the new crank seal and the pan gasket seal. For those of you who want to know, those are the names and part numbers, and there is the prices that I paid for both of them. Oil pan gaskets at the bottom was $5, and the crank seal was $6.18. One thing else that's worth mentioning, I found these torque specifications online. What you'll need to get are the torque specifications. As you can see here, oil pan screw for underneath the crankcase, 98 inch-pounds. So if you're using a torque wrench with foot-pounds, you'll need to convert it. Just divide 98 by 12 and that'll give you the number that you need. So here's the new gasket. And pull it out of the bag. Line it up, make sure they sent us the right one. Now if you guys remember from the past video, which is in the description bar, Kohler, it appeared, went ahead and installed the wrong gasket from the factory. So it's important to go ahead and make sure that this is correct, and it does appear that it's correct. Now anytime I'm working with paper gaskets, I like to use this gasket shellac. It does a really fine job with sealing from any future leaks, and it works with just about every sort of fluid that's in any sort of motor. The directions say apply a thin, even coat to both surfaces, allow a few minutes to dry, then assemble. Resist gasoline, motor oil, antifreeze, diesel oil, water, and steam. I've primarily used this stuff on water pumps, and it's worked great for that, but as you guys have just heard, it works great for oil as well. So, let it dry a couple minutes. I'm just going to go ahead and kind of put it in place before I go ahead and assemble the rest of the motor together. And there's two dowel pins. There's one right here and one right over here. So I'm just going to let it sit in place for a couple minutes, and then we'll go ahead and install it. Now before I go ahead and install this, I wanted to make a note of this because I forgot to. This little shaft that comes out here for the governor, which actuates the, or which moves, I should say, with the counterweights, you want to make sure that is pressed all the way in. And then this little paddle right here, and then that little paddle right there sticking out like the end of a hockey stick, you want to make sure that little paddle goes in between the nub of the crankcase and that little conical rod that comes out. So go ahead and grab your oil pan, all the while making sure, nice and slowly, that that paddle does not obstruct with anything. Can't really see it on the camera all that well, but I can see it just fine. And it goes down perfectly. So now we can start with the bolts. Now one thing I always like to do when going back in with bolts that are in a circular pattern like this is go ahead and put them in by hand. This will remove any doubt if you're worried about cross-threading them or not, because obviously if you're threading them in by hand like I am, they're not really going to cross-thread. You're not applying enough force to make that happen. Now we have our torque wrench. It's set to 98 inch-pounds. I also have another torque wrench which is in foot-pounds, but obviously I'm not going to use that. So it's also important to note that I have not taken a ratchet or any other kind of tool to tighten these down any further. They're all threaded in by hand. None of them are snugged up. So when you go ahead and do stuff like this, you always want to go kind of in a crisscross pattern. And just go it nice and slowly. That one's good. So we'll do the one directly across. That's good as well. And that's all you do. You go from that one to that one, this one to this one, that one to that one, and that one. I think there's an odd number. So one of them you're going to have to do essentially kind of out of that order, but just kind of get it as close as you possibly can. So now we're on to the, well, at least as far as the maintenance goes, we're on the last part that we have to replace. So these are pretty simple to install. Brand new oil seal. What you want to do with these is kind of coat them a little bit with some engine oil, and they go in a lot easier inside of that little crevice. Before you go ahead and install it, make sure that you kind of clean that out a little bit. There's a little bit of dirt and grime in there, so I'll go ahead and shoot some carb cleaner in it. So now we can go ahead and install the crank seal. So the crank seal, when you go ahead and install one of these, is, as I said, it's always best to keep them lubed up with oil. And just go ahead and slide it down and in place. You're going to have to give it a little bit of help trying to seat it. And then just kind of lightly tap it in with a mallet. And then I'm looking at it from the side to see if we have any bulges coming out. It doesn't appear that we do. So I'll just tap it down a couple more times. And there you have it. So now we can flip it back over, put some oil in it, and see if it'll work on that mower. So now I'm just going to go ahead and fill it up with oil. Lawnmower engines typically only take about 20 ounces, and as verified by the capacities in the service manual, this one does in fact only take 20 ounces of oil. You can also run straight 30 weight oil in these or 10W30. I'm going to go ahead and go with 10W30 because for the temperature range here, that's typically what you would want to run it with as far as the oil chart is concerned. So my oil of choice is Walmart's SuperTech brand. In lawnmowers, it doesn't really matter what brand you choose, and this stuff is cheap enough. I repair and fix so many of these things and change the oil on so many of them that it's more cost effective for me to buy the cheaper oil, so that's what I use. So let's go ahead and dump about 20 ounces in. And as you guys can see, it is right at the top little, it's right at the top little hole there. So now I'm going to go ahead and throw some gas in her, and then we'll give her a start and see what happens. So I'll have to throw a hose clamp onto that to see if I can get it to stop or not, or I'll just replace the fuel line. I did clean this carburetor out before I put it in storage. I'm definitely happy with that. And I'm going to have to adjust the governor linkage there, but that's not going to be a big deal. I'll show you guys how to do that. Now I just have to slightly adjust the governor. I have to make it essentially go down. So what I have to do is basically loosen this little nut right here, get a pair of vice grips here, and essentially turn it like that clockwise. And that should turn the RPMs down just a little bit. It doesn't need much, and it's just over where I would like it to be. As you guys can see, I have a pair of vice grips on the outer end. Unfortunately, there's a lot of trial and error when it goes into adjusting these. And I'm just doing this by ear. The real way you're supposed to do this is with a small tachometer. Let's see how much of a difference this makes. Much better. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. It sounded like it was surging. Check again. That's good enough for me. So now I'll go ahead and torque that down, and we'll start cleaning this thing up. And so now this will be the final look and start of this thing. Runs really good, cleaned up really nicely. So it's got new oil in it, new air filter, brand new blade, new fuel line, and new seals, of course, in the engine. In total, I'm about $40, $45 into this thing, and I should easily be able to make that back. Best I can tell, because the market's finally picked back up over the past couple weeks, and I have not been able to hold on to a lawnmower any longer than 24 hours, I should be able to get at least $150 for these, you know, each. This one will be for sale too. I just washed it off. So I'll give you guys a final start of this. I have run it quite a bit, and I've been looking at the seals and trying to determine if there's any leaks or not, and everything appears to be holding up very, very nicely. Everything's held up just terrific. I'm totally satisfied with that. So anyways, enough of me rambling. I'll get you guys a couple starts. Self-propel works too. I am totally satisfied with this. Very happy that this motor ended up working out. It's been sitting on the shelf for just about a year now. I love free stuff. Alrighty boys, well I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Rate, comment, subscribe. I always have small engine stuff going on, coming up on YouTube. And you all stay classy.